The last light of day bled across Manhattan's jagged skyline, painting glass towers in crimson and gold. From the 63rd floor of the Obsidian Tower, Dominic Vane observed the spectacle with eyes that had witnessed 10,000 sunsets. The penthouse was silent save for the occasional whisper of the climate control system, a sound imperceptible to human ears, but to him, a constant companion in his solitude. He stood motionless at the floor-to-ceiling window, one hand resting against the triple-paned glass. The cold December air outside couldn't penetrate the barrier, yet he sensed it nonetheless, the biting chill that turned human breath to vapor and slowed their fragile hearts. The city lights began their nightly awakening, constellations of artificial stars spreading across the darkening canvas below. Dominic inhaled deeply, though his body had no need for oxygen. It was habit, a vestige of humanity he maintained like the antique pocket watch in his vest. The air in the penthouse carried the scent of leather-bound books, the faint metallic tang of the specialized refrigeration unit hidden behind a false wall, and the absence of life. No dust mites dancing in air currents, no microscopic flakes of human skin, no bacteria multiplying in forgotten corners. His living space was as sterile as a tomb and nearly as quiet. His reflection stared back at him from the darkening glass, pale features framed by raven hair, cut precisely at the collar of his charcoal suit. The face hadn't changed in centuries, a perfect mask hiding the predator beneath. Only his eyes betrayed his nature, dark as wells until hunger or rage filled them with amber light. A vibration disturbed the perfect stillness. His phone, signaling a message from his investment team. Another billion acquired, another corporation absorbed, the notification barely registered in his consciousness. Wealth had long ceased to provide any satisfaction beyond the security and isolation it afforded him. The first stars appeared in the eastern sky as night claimed the city. Dominic's fingers traced an invisible pattern on the glass as he contemplated another evening of emptiness. 300 years of existence had dulled even the most exquisite pleasures. Books he'd read a dozen times. Music that no longer stirred emotion. The hunt, once thrilling, now mechanical. A biological necessity rather than a joy. Perhaps tonight he would venture out. Not to feed, his reserves would last another week, but to walk among them. To remember, however briefly, what it meant to exist in their world of deadlines and desires, of heartbeats and heated blood. The elevator descended silently, carrying Dominic 63 floors down to the private garage beneath the tower. The subtle pressure change would have been imperceptible to human senses, but he felt it as a gentle wave washing over his skin. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a collection of vehicles acquired over decades, each chosen for anonymity rather than ostentation. He selected the matte black Audi, its engine purring to life with a touch. The sound resonated in his chest, a mechanical heartbeat to accompany his silent one. The garage door rolled upward, and winter air rushed in, carrying the complex symphony of the city. Exhaust fumes, restaurant kitchens, perfumes, sweat, and beneath it all, the constant undercurrent of blood flowing through 8 million bodies. Dominic navigated the streets with precision, each movement calculated and smooth. Traffic parted before him, drivers unconsciously sensing the predator in their midst. He had no destination in mind, only the need to move, to observe, to remember what hunger felt like when it wasn't just for sustenance. Central Park loomed ahead, a dark rectangle carved from the glittering grid of Manhattan. On impulse, he turned toward it, drawn to the relative wildness in the heart of civilization. The park after dark, Dangerous for humans, peaceful for him. Here, at least, nature maintained a tenuous foothold, and the scents were cleaner, sharper. He parked the Audi and stepped into the December night. Snow had begun to fall, delicate crystals that melted against his cold skin. The park was nearly empty, sensible humans having retreated from the biting cold. Those who remained hurried along illuminated paths, hunched against the wind, hearts quickened by the combination of exertion and primal fear of darkness. Dominic walked unhurriedly, his footsteps leaving perfect impressions in the gathering snow. The cold couldn't touch him, couldn't slow the preternatural grace with which he moved. He followed a path that wound deeper into the park, away from the last lingering tourists and toward the areas where only the desperate or foolish ventured after nightfall. The snow intensified, curtaining the world in white. The sounds of the city grew muffled, as if Manhattan itself were being entombed in ice. Dominic paused, listening to the silence, when a new sound reached him. Faint, irregular, but unmistakable. A heartbeat. Small, rapid, faltering. A child's heart, struggling against the cold. He turned toward the sound, his senses sharpening with predatory focus. 20 meters away, partially concealed by a stand of bare-branched elms, a small figure huddled on a bench. The wind shifted, bringing with it a scent that stopped Dominic in his tracks. Beneath the expected smells of human child, milk teeth, strawberry shampoo, the cotton candy sweetness of young blood, was something impossible. Something he hadn't encountered in over 2 decades. A scent he would know in absolute darkness, across continents, beyond death itself. Audrey, he whispered, the name forming frost in the winter air. Dominic approached the bench with measured steps, fighting against the sudden rush of memories the scent evoked. Candlelight on pale skin, laughter like silver bells, the taste of tears, a promise broken. But Audrey was gone, had been gone for 23 years, 3 months, and 17 days. This was something else, something impossible. The child on the bench was a girl, no more than 8 years old. Dark hair spilled from beneath a woolen hat, framing a face blue-tinged with cold. Her coat was expensive but inadequate for the bitter night. No gloves, no scarf. She sat perfectly still, small hands folded in her lap, as if waiting for someone who would never arrive. Dominic stopped 3 meters away, calculating. The girl was alone, abandoned, lost, a trap. In his centuries of existence, he had learned that coincidences were rarely innocent, particularly when they carried the scent of the past. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and controlled. "The park is dangerous after dark." The girl looked up, and Dominic felt a jolt of recognition so powerful it nearly drove him to his knees. Her eyes, Audrey's eyes, large and luminous, the precise shade of amber that had haunted his dreams for 2 decades. "I know," she replied, her voice small but steady. "But I had to come." Dominic's mind raced through possibilities. A relative of Audrey's? A trap set by Graves? Some cruel cosmic joke? He extended his senses, searching for others nearby, for the telltale signs of an ambush. Nothing but the occasional distant jogger, the homeless man sleeping beneath plastic tarps 50 meters east, a pair of raccoons foraging near the water. "Where are your parents?" he asked, maintaining his distance despite the pull he felt toward the child. The girl's lower lip trembled slightly. "My mom died when I was a baby." The words hung in the freezing air between them. Dominic calculated rapidly. 23 years since Audrey. This child, perhaps 8 years old. The timing was problematic. "And your father?" he pressed, though he already suspected the answer. "I don't have one." She looked directly at him now, her gaze unnervingly steady for a child. "Not really." A gust of wind swept through the park, carrying ice crystals that stung like tiny needles. The girl shivered violently, her heartbeat stuttering. Hypothermia was setting in. Whatever mystery she presented, the child would not survive much longer in these conditions. Dominic removed his coat in a fluid motion and approached the bench. The girl watched him without fear. Another impossibility. Children, like animals, instinctively sensed the predator in him. They crossed streets to avoid his path. They cried when he smiled. "You need warmth," he said, draping the coat around her small shoulders. It engulfed her completely, the hem pooling on the snow-covered ground. The moment his fingers brushed against her skin, he felt it. A current, like electricity but older, deeper. Recognition at a cellular level. The girl felt it too. Her eyes widened slightly, pupils dilating. "What's your name?" Dominic asked, though part of him already knew, had known from the moment her scent reached him. "Sophia," she said. "Sophia Reed." Reed. Audrey's surname. The confirmation sent a wave of something long forgotten through Dominic's ancient body. Not hunger, not anger, but something more primal, more dangerous. "How did you find me, Sophia Reed?" he asked, crouching to her level, his voice barely audible over the whisper of falling snow. The girl, Sophia, reached into the pocket of her inadequate coat and withdrew a photograph, its edges worn soft with handling. She held it out to him with fingers mottled blue and white from cold. Dominic took it, though he had no need to look. He knew what he would see. Himself and Audrey standing before the fountain at the Bellagio, her smile radiant, his arm around her waist. The last night. The night before he'd left her, to protect her from graves, from the truth, from himself. "My mom kept it in a box with my birth certificate," Sophia said, her voice growing weaker as the cold claimed her strength. "Your name was there. I found where you live. I came to see." Her voice trailed off as her eyes began to close, her small body surrendering to the cold. Dominic felt panic, an emotion so long absent he barely recognized it. The child was dying before him. The child who carried Audrey's blood. The child who, impossibly, carried his own. Sophia. Dominic's voice cut through the gathering darkness of her consciousness. "Sophia Reed. Look at me." Her eyelids fluttered, revealing those amber eyes once more. Her heartbeat was dangerously slow now, the rhythm faltering. Each breath emerged as a wisp of vapor, fainter than the last. Dominic made a decision that violated every rule he had lived by for centuries. With gentle precision, he gathered the child into his arms, cradling her against his chest. She weighed nothing, a bundle of fragile bones wrapped in cooling flesh. The coat enveloped her like a cocoon as he stood, holding her as one might hold a precious artifact in danger of shattering. "I'm taking you to warmth," he said, already moving toward the path with inhuman speed. "Stay awake, Sophia. Listen to my voice." Her head lolled against his shoulder, consciousness slipping away despite his command. Dominic felt something crack within him, a fissure in the careful wall built over centuries of isolation. This child, this impossible child, had breached his defenses with nothing more than her existence. The snow fell harder now, a white curtain that would have blinded human eyes. Dominic moved through it unerringly, his steps swift and silent. The Audi appeared before him, a dark shape against the whiteness. He opened the passenger door with one hand, never loosening his grip on the child. As he settled her into the seat, Sophia's eyes opened once more, focusing on his face with startling clarity. For a moment, Dominic saw Audrey in every line of her features, the determined set of her jaw, the slight arch of her eyebrows, the intelligence behind her gaze. "You're cold," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "like ice cream." Despite everything, Dominic felt his lips curve in the ghost of a smile. "Yes," he agreed. "I am." He reached across her to secure the seatbelt, an unnecessary precaution given his driving abilities, but a human gesture that felt right in the moment. As he did, Sophia's small hand emerged from the folds of his coat and touched his wrist. Her fingers were like ice, but the contact burned him nonetheless. "I knew you were real," she said, her words slurring slightly as hypothermia clouded her thoughts. "Mom's angel." Dominic froze, the term striking him like a physical blow. Angel. The word Audrey had used for him, never knowing the irony, never suspecting the truth. "I'm no angel, Sophia Reed," he said softly, withdrawing his hand from her touch. The child's eyes were closing again, her strength nearly gone. But as consciousness faded, she spoke 5 words that shattered what remained of Dominic's carefully constructed isolation. "Please," she whispered, "take me home." The request hung in the frigid air between them, impossible in its simplicity, devastating in its implications. Home. A concept Dominic had abandoned centuries ago, along with daylight and humanity. He closed the passenger door and moved around to the driver's side, his mind racing through possibilities, consequences, dangers. Graves would know soon, if he didn't already. The child couldn't be hidden, couldn't be protected, couldn't be explained. As he slid behind the wheel, Dominic caught the scent again. Audrey's blood, but altered, combined with something ancient and familiar. His own genetic signature, dormant but unmistakable. The evidence his senses had been trying to communicate since he first approached the bench. He turned to look at the child, his child, as her head rested against the window, breath fogging the glass in diminishing clouds. Something primal and protective surged through him, a feeling he had thought long dead. Dominic's eyes, dark as night for centuries of careful control, suddenly blazed with amber fire, illuminating the interior of the car with predatory light. The change was involuntary, triggered by something deeper than hunger or rage, something he had no name for. The child was his, and nothing in this world or beyond would take her from him again. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness as Dominic pulled away from the curb. His amber eyes dimmed to their usual darkness, but the feeling that had triggered them remained. A fierce, ancient protectiveness he hadn't felt in centuries. The child slumped against the door, her small body radiating cold. Even unconscious, her fingers clutched the locket at her throat, knuckles white with determination. Dominic reached across and adjusted the heat to maximum, watching as the warm air stirred wisps of her dark hair. "Home," he whispered, tasting the word like something foreign on his tongue. His penthouse had never been home, merely a fortress, a place to retreat from the world. But tonight, it would need to be more. The streets of the city blurred past as he drove, his heightened senses monitoring the child's heartbeat. It fluttered like a wounded bird, too fast then too slow, her body fighting against exhaustion and cold. Dominic pressed harder on the accelerator, the speedometer climbing as they raced through the empty streets. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Dominic ignored it. Then it buzzed again, insistent. At a red light, he glanced at the screen. Perimeter breach alert, East Sector. Graves was already moving, searching. The light turned green, and Dominic accelerated, taking a sharp turn down a side street, then another. The route to his building was never direct, a precaution born from centuries of survival. Tonight, that caution might save them both. The private underground garage of his building appeared ahead, the security gate rising as his car approached. Dominic glanced in the rearview mirror, scanning for followers, before pulling into his reserved space. The garage was silent except for the ticking of the cooling engine and the child's shallow breathing. He moved around to the passenger side, opening the door carefully to catch her as she slumped toward him. Her skin was ice cold against his, though his own body held no warmth to offer in return. Dominic lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest as he carried her to the private elevator. Inside, he pressed his palm against the biometric scanner, the elevator responding with a soft hum as it began its ascent to the penthouse. Sophia stirred slightly in his arms, her eyelids fluttering but not opening. "Mama," she murmured, the word barely audible. Dominic felt something twist inside him, a pain he'd thought himself incapable of feeling. "She's not here," he said softly, knowing the child couldn't hear him. "But you're safe now." The elevator doors opened directly into his penthouse, a vast space of shadow and minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the far wall, offering a panoramic view of the city below, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Dominic moved through the darkness with ease, requiring no light to navigate the space. He laid Sophia gently on the sofa, a sleek leather piece that had never known a child's touch. Her small form seemed impossibly fragile against the stark modernity of his surroundings. Dominic stood for a moment, suddenly uncertain. What did children need? Warmth, certainly. Food. Rest. He retrieved a cashmere throw from his bedroom and draped it over her, tucking it around her shoulders. Her breathing had steadied somewhat, but her skin remained pale, her cheeks flushed with the beginnings of fever. Dominic's phone buzzed again. Another alert. Perimeter breach alert, West Sector. Graves was being methodical, working his way through the city. It wouldn't take him long to narrow down the possibilities. Time was already running short. The child needed warmth, more than a blanket could provide. Dominic moved to the fireplace, a modern gas fixture he'd never actually used, and figured out the controls. Flames leapt to life, casting dancing shadows across the room. He adjusted the thermostat as well, raising the temperature of the entire penthouse. Returning to Sophia, he knelt beside the sofa, studying her face. Audrey's features were there, the curve of her cheek, the shape of her mouth, but there was something of himself as well, in the set of her jaw, the arch of her eyebrows. How had he not seen it immediately? The locket at her throat gleamed in the firelight. Dominic reached out, his fingers hovering just above it, not quite touching. He could smell Audrey's blood within, a drop, perhaps, sealed away. A keepsake, a message. Sophia's eyes snapped open, startling him. For a moment she stared at him without recognition, fear clouding her gaze. Then awareness returned, and with it, wariness. "Where am I?" Her voice was stronger than he expected. "My home," Dominic replied, withdrawing his hand. "You asked me to bring you here." She pushed herself up slightly, wincing. "I meant my home." "I know." Dominic rose and moved a few steps away, giving her space. But it wasn't safe there. You were being followed. Sophia's hand went to the locket, clutching it protectively. By the man with the yellow eyes. Dominic went still. Yellow eyes? She nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Like a wolf. He came to our apartment last week. Mom told me to hide in the closet, but I could see through the slats. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He hurt her. She screamed, but then she stopped. And then he started looking for something. For me, I think. Graves. It had to be. The rival vampire lord had always been less cautious than Dominic, less controlled. His eyes would shift when he fed, when he hunted, yellow like an animal's. How did you get away? Dominic asked, keeping his voice gentle. Mom told me about the fire escape. Before. Sophia looked down at her hands. She said if anything ever happened, I should take her locket and find the man in the photo. That he would protect me. She looked up at Dominic, her gaze direct despite her exhaustion. That's you, isn't it? In the locket? Dominic felt a surge of something. Gratitude, perhaps, toward Audrey. Even in death, she had tried to protect their child, had sent her to him. May I see it? He asked. Sophia hesitated, then slowly removed the locket from around her neck. The chain was too long for her, the pendant resting nearly at her stomach rather than her chest. She held it out, but didn't let go when Dominic reached for it, creating a link between them. He opened it carefully. Inside, as he'd expected, was a small photograph, worn at the edges from being handled. It showed him as he'd been nearly a decade ago, standing in the gardens of his estate outside the city. A place he'd abandoned after Audrey left. His expression in the photo was unguarded, almost human, a look Audrey alone had been able to capture. Opposite the photo was a tiny compartment, sealed with wax. He could smell what it contained, a drop of Audrey's blood, preserved. A message only he could read. Your mother gave you this? He asked, releasing the locket. Sophia nodded, slipping it back around her neck. She said it would keep me safe, that you would know what to do. She looked around the penthouse, taking in the stark luxury, the emptiness. Do you live here all alone? Yes. Dominic moved to the kitchen, a space he rarely used. Are you hungry? Sophia seemed to consider this, as if taking inventory of her needs. Yes, she finally said, and thirsty. Dominic opened the refrigerator, surveying its sparse contents. He kept food for appearances, for the rare human visitor, but it was not something he thought about often. There was bottled water, at least, and some fruit that looked relatively fresh. He placed these on the counter, then opened a few cabinets, finding crackers and a jar of honey. It was a poor offering, but Sophia accepted the plate and glass of water without complaint when he brought them to her. She ate slowly, methodically, her movements precise despite her exhaustion. Dominic watched her, fascinated by these small human rituals he'd long forgotten. The man who hurt your mother, he said carefully. Did he say what he wanted? Sophia took a sip of water before answering. He kept asking about the child of two worlds. Mom told him there was no such thing. She set the glass down, but he didn't believe her. Child of two worlds. Dominic felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was an old phrase, from the ancient texts of his kind. A prophecy, some believed. A warning, others said. The offspring of a vampire and a human was supposed to be impossible. Their genetic structures too different, the vampire's nature too dominant. Yet here she sat, living proof. Sophia yawned suddenly, her small body swaying with fatigue. The food and warmth were pulling her towards sleep, her eyelids growing heavy. "You should rest," Dominic said, taking the plate from her hands. "We'll talk more in the morning." She looked up at him, a flash of fear crossing her face. "Will you stay? What if he finds us?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "He won't. This place is secure." He hesitated, then added, "But yes, I'll stay close by." This seemed to satisfy her. Sophia lay back down, pulling the cashmere throw up to her chin. Within minutes, her breathing deepened, sleep claiming her. Dominic stood watching her for a long moment, this impossible child who carried his blood. Then he moved to the windows, looking out over the city, searching for signs of pursuit. His phone remained silent, no more security alerts, but that didn't mean Graves had given up. It meant he was being more careful. The hunger was rising in him, a burning in his veins. He'd gone too long without feeding, and the night's events had drained his reserves. Dominic moved away from the sleeping child, putting distance between them. Her scent. Audrey's blood mingled with his own dormant genetic signature, called to him in ways he didn't fully understand. Not just hunger, but recognition. Connection. He needed to feed, but he couldn't leave her alone. Not with Graves hunting. Dominic moved to a hidden panel in the wall, pressing his palm against it. The panel slid open, revealing a small refrigerated compartment. Inside were several vials of synthetic blood, a poor substitute for the real thing, but enough to take the edge off his hunger. He consumed one quickly, grimacing at the artificial taste, then another. The burning in his veins subsided slightly, enough that he could think clearly again. He would need real blood soon, but this would sustain him for now. Returning to the sofa, Dominic settled into an armchair opposite Sophia, where he could watch both her and the entrance to the penthouse. Her face in sleep was peaceful, the worry and fear smoothed away. One small hand still clutched the locket, even in unconsciousness. Dominic's thoughts turned to Audrey. He had left her, or she had left him, the distinction blurred by time and pain, never knowing she carried his child. Had she known what the child might be, what dangers might follow? The locket suggested she had some understanding, some knowledge of the supernatural world he inhabited. A soft whimper from Sophia interrupted his thoughts. She shifted restlessly under the blanket, her face contorting in distress. A nightmare, perhaps. Without thinking, Dominic moved to her side, his hand hovering uncertainly over her head. He had no experience comforting children, no instinct to guide him. Yet something deeper than instinct moved him. He gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his cool fingers lingering against her skin. Sophia's distress eased, her breathing steadying once more. Dominic withdrew his hand, surprised by the effect of that simple touch, not on her but on himself. A strange warmth spread through him, unfamiliar and almost painful in its intensity. His phone vibrated. Not a security alert this time, but a message. Dominic pulled it from his pocket, his expression hardening as he read. "I know what you have, what she is. This isn't over. Graves." No signature was needed. Dominic recognized the threat in those simple words. He deleted the message, his jaw tight with anger. How much did Graves know? How had he learned of Sophia's existence before Dominic himself? The child of two worlds, the phrase echoed in his mind, ancient and ominous. If the old texts were to be believed, such a child would possess unique abilities, neither fully vampire nor fully human, but something new, something powerful, something that could tip the balance of power among their kind. No wonder Graves wanted her. But his rival's interest went beyond power politics. There was something personal in this hunt, something Dominic didn't yet understand. Dawn was approaching. He could feel it in his bones, a heaviness that came with the sun's proximity. Unlike the vampires of myth, daylight wouldn't destroy him, but it would weaken him, slow him, make him vulnerable. Dominic moved through the penthouse, activating the specialized window treatments that would block the harmful rays while still allowing diffuse light to enter. As the first pale light of morning touched the horizon, Dominic returned to his vigil beside Sophia. Her fever had broken during the night. Her skin was cooler now, her breathing deeper and more regular. The worst of the physical danger had passed, but greater dangers were coming. Dominic could feel it with the certainty of centuries of survival. Graves wouldn't stop, and there were others who would come once word spread of the child's existence. Sophia stirred, her eyes opening slowly, focusing on him with that direct gaze that seemed too old for her years. "You're still here," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "I said I would be." Dominic moved back slightly, giving her space. She sat up, the blanket pooling around her waist. "I'm hungry again." Dominic nodded, rising. "I'll find something more substantial than crackers." In the kitchen, he discovered his supplies were even more limited than he'd realized. There was little that would appeal to a child, or to any human for that matter. He would need to order food, have it delivered. Another complication, another potential security breach. "Do you like eggs?" he called, finding a carton that was still within its expiration date. "With toast," Sophia replied, coming to perch on one of the bar stools at the kitchen counter. She watched him with curious eyes as he moved around the kitchen, her gaze following his every movement. "You don't eat, do you?" The question caught him off guard. Dominic paused, a pan in his hand. "What makes you say that? Your refrigerator is almost empty, and you move differently than other people." She tilted her head, studying him. "Mom said you were special, different." Dominic set the pan on the stove, considering his response. How much had Audrey told her? How much should he reveal? "I eat, differently," he finally said, cracking eggs into the pan with more force than necessary. "And yes, I am different from most people you know." "Like the man with the yellow eyes?" Her voice had gone small. Dominic turned to face her fully. "No, not like him." He held her gaze, wanting her to see the truth in his eyes. "He hurt your mother. I would never have hurt her. Or you." Sophia seemed to weigh this, her small fingers tracing patterns on the counter. "But you're the same type of person?" "In some ways." Dominic turned back to the eggs, which were beginning to smoke slightly. He adjusted the heat, buying time. "It's complicated, Sophia." "I'm smart," she said simply. "Mom always said I was smart beyond my years." Dominic couldn't help the small smile that touched his lips. "I'm sure you are." He slid the eggs onto a plate, added toast, and placed it before her. "Eat first, then we'll talk." She accepted this compromise, picking up the fork he offered. Dominic watched her eat, struck again by how ordinary the act seemed, how human. Yet there was nothing ordinary about this child, about what she represented. "Your locket," he said as she finished eating. "May I look at it again?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded, slipping the chain over her head. This time she handed it to him without reservation, her trust growing incrementally. Dominic opened it carefully, studying the photograph again before turning his attention to the sealed compartment. The wax seal was intricate, a pattern he recognized as one Audrey had used in her artwork, a signature of sorts. "Do you know what's in here?" he asked, indicating the sealed section. Sophia shook her head. "Mom said it was a message, that only you would be able to read it." Audrey had known more than he'd realized, had understood what he was, perhaps even what their child might be. Dominic broke the seal carefully, the scent of Audrey's blood, preserved somehow, still vital, filling his senses immediately. A drop, no more. But blood carried memory, carried truth, for his kind. Dominic touched his finger to it, the barest contact, and closed his eyes as images flooded his mind. Audrey, heavy with child, afraid, running, a book of ancient legends open on a table. Graves, younger but recognizable, watching from a distance. The birth of the child, Sophia, and Audrey's wonder as she held her. Then fear again, as the infant displayed unusual abilities, healing too quickly from a cut, sensing things before they happened. Years passing in a blur of constant movement, new apartments, new identities. Audrey teaching Sophia to hide what made her different, to blend in. And always, the sense of being watched, hunted. The final memory was the most vivid. Audrey writing a letter, sealing a drop of her blood in the locket, explaining to Sophia about Dominic, about what he was, what she might become, about the prophecy of the child of two worlds, and why others would seek to control or destroy her. The connection broke as the blood lost its potency, the memories fading. Dominic opened his eyes to find Sophia watching him intently. "What did it say?" she asked. Dominic closed the locket, his hand tightening around it momentarily before he handed it back to her. "Your mother was very brave," he said. "She protected you as long as she could, but now she's gone." Sophia's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And I'm alone." "No," Dominic said, the word emerging more forcefully than he intended. "You're not alone. I'm here now." "Because of what I am?" There was a wisdom in her question that belied her years. Dominic considered lying, offering her the comforting fiction that most adults would give a child. But something in her gaze demanded honesty. "At first, perhaps," he admitted. "But now, because of who you are. Because you're Audrey's daughter." He paused, the next words difficult to form. "And mine." Sophia's eyes widened. "You're my father?" "Yes." The word felt strange on his tongue, a title he had never expected to claim. "Your mother and I, we were together before you were born. She left without telling me about you. Hakuto, to protect me," Sophia said with certainty. "From the bad ones like the yellow-eyed man." "Yes." Dominic moved around the counter, kneeling to her eye level. "Sophia, there are things about yourself, about what you can do that you may have noticed. Things that make you different." She looked down at her hands. "I heal fast, and sometimes I know things before they happen." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I'm stronger than I should be. I broke a door once at school. Mom had to explain it away." Dominic nodded. "These abilities come from me, from what I am." "And what are you?" She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. The moment stretched between them, taut with significance. Dominic had never revealed himself so directly to a human, not even to Audrey, who had guessed much but never heard the word from his lips. "I am a vampire," he said simply. "One of the oldest living, and you are something unique, half human, half vampire. The child of two worlds." Sophia absorbed this without the shock or disbelief he might have expected. Perhaps children were more accepting of the impossible. Or perhaps she had always known, on some level, that she was different in ways that went beyond the ordinary. Is that why the yellow-eyed man wants me? Because I'm special? His name is Victor Graves, Dominic said. And yes, that's part of it. But there's more I don't yet understand. A sudden crash of breaking glass shattered the moment. Dominic was on his feet instantly, pushing Sophia behind him as he turned toward the source of the sound. One of the floor-to-ceiling windows had exploded inward, shards of safety glass cascading across the floor like deadly diamonds. Through the gaping hole stepped Victor Graves, his yellow eyes gleaming in the diffuse morning light, a predatory smile revealing the tips of his fangs. "How touching," Graves said, brushing glass from his expensive suit. "A family reunion at last." Dominic pushed Sophia further behind him, his own eyes shifting to amber as his predatory nature rose to the surface. "How did you get past my security?" Graves laughed, the sound cold and brittle. "You're not the only one with resources, old friend, and I've had years to plan this moment." His gaze shifted to Sophia, who was peering around Dominic's protective stance. "Hello, little one. I've been looking for you for a very long time." Dominic's muscles coiled as Graves took a step toward them. The air in the penthouse seemed to thin, charged with the ancient tension of two predators circling. "You won't touch her," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a register that hadn't passed his lips in centuries. The voice of the king he once was, commanding legions in darkness. Graves tilted his head, yellow eyes gleaming with amusement. "After all this time, you still don't understand what's happening, do you?" He gestured toward Sophia with an elegant pale hand. "She's not just Audrey's daughter. She's the culmination of a bloodline I've tracked for 7 generations. The perfect vessel." Behind him, Sophia's small fingers clutched the fabric of Dominic's shirt. He could feel her heart racing, the rhythm a counterpoint to his own stillness. The child was afraid, but not panicking. There was steel in her, just like her mother. "Oh, whatever ritual or prophecy you've concocted, it dies here," Dominic said, taking a half-step forward. The movement was casual to human eyes, but between predators, it was a declaration of intent. Graves smiled, revealing fangs that gleamed like ivory needles. "You've grown soft, old friend, playing human for too long." His gaze flicked to the windows, where the morning light filtered through the clouds. "You've forgotten what real power feels like." With blinding speed, Graves lunged, not at Dominic, but at the remaining windows. His fist connected with the glass, shattering it outward in a crystalline explosion. Sunlight flooded the room, harsh beams cutting across the floor in deadly stripes. Dominic hissed, pulling Sophia with him into the shadow of a structural column. The sunlight wouldn't kill him instantly. He was too old, too powerful for that. But it weakened him, burning his skin where it touched. "Run to the elevator," he whispered to Sophia. "The code is 1891. Go to the garage level. Hide." "But now, Sophia." He gave her a gentle push toward the hallway. Graves laughed as he watched the exchange. "She won't make it to the elevator, Dominic. I'm not alone." As if summoned by his words, 2 figures emerged from the stairwell entrance. Younger vampires, their movements twitchy with bloodlust and inexperience. Graves' foot soldiers. "You see," Graves continued, circling to keep Dominic trapped in the diminishing patch of shadow. "While you've been building your financial empire, I've been building something more traditional." Dominic's mind raced. The sun would move, shadows would shift. He had perhaps 3 minutes before his position became untenable. Sophia stood frozen in the hallway, her escape route blocked by Graves's minions. "What do you want with her?" Dominic demanded, playing for time as he assessed his options. "So the prophecy of the Crimson Child," Graves said, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "A half-blood born of ancient lines, whose sacrifice will grant immunity to the sun. Imagine it, Dominic, walking in daylight without fear, ruling humans openly instead of from the shadows." Sophia's breathing quickened. "Sacrifice?" Graves smiled at her, a terrible gentleness in his expression. "It won't hurt, little one. Not for long." Something ancient and terrible unfurled in Dominic's chest, a rage he hadn't felt since the night he found Audrey's broken body. The temperature in the room plummeted, frost crystallizing on the shattered glass at their feet. "You will never touch her," Dominic said, each word a death sentence. Graves sighed dramatically. "Always the hero, even when it's against your nature." He nodded to his minions. "Take the girl. Kill him if you can. But don't risk yourselves unnecessarily." The younger vampires moved with supernatural speed, but to Dominic's ancient eyes, they might as well have been wading through molasses. He calculated trajectories, weaknesses, the shifting pattern of sunlight on the floor. The first attacker reached for Sophia. Dominic abandoned his safe shadow, skin blistering as he crossed a beam of sunlight. His hand closed around the young vampire's throat, crushing his windpipe before the creature could register what had happened. He hurled the body into the second attacker, sending both crashing into the wall. "Sophia, behind the couch!" Dominic shouted, using his body to shield her from Graves's sight. The girl darted across the room, diving behind the massive leather sectional. The second vampire was already recovering, circling warily now that he'd seen Dominic's speed. Graves clapped slowly, mockingly. "Impressive. But how long can you keep this up in the sunlight, old friend? I've been drinking from the bloodline for decades. I'm stronger in the day than you remember." Outside, clouds began to gather, darkening the sky with unnatural speed. The wind picked up, howling around the building's spire. Dominic had not called a storm in centuries, but the ancient power responded to his need, to his rage. Thunder cracked directly overhead as Dominic launched himself at Graves. They collided with the force of 2 meteors, the impact sending shockwaves through the penthouse. Furniture splintered, art pieces crashed to the floor. The remaining vampire minion scrambled back, suddenly uncertain of his role in this battle of ancients. Graves was strong, stronger than Dominic had anticipated. His yellow eyes blazed with triumph as he caught Dominic's wrist, twisting until bones cracked. "You've grown weak," Graves hissed, driving Dominic back toward a shaft of sunlight. "Centuries of isolation, decades of mourning. For what? A human woman who would have died anyway?" Dominic's skin smoked where the light touched it, but he no longer cared about the pain. He could see Sophia's face peering over the edge of the couch, her eyes wide with fear, not for herself, but for him. The storm outside intensified, clouds now completely blotting out the sun. Rain lashed against the broken windows, driven sideways by gale-force winds. The temperature in the room plunged further as Dominic drew power from the chaos of the elements. "You're right about one thing," Dominic said, his voice cutting through the howl of the wind. "I have been weak, hiding from what I am." His eyes shifted, not to the amber of a hunting vampire, but to a deep, burning crimson that hadn't been seen in the world for a millennium. But no longer. With a roar that shook the foundations of the building, Dominic broke Graves's hold. His movements became a blur, even to vampire eyes. He struck with the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 years of combat, targeting nerve clusters and ancient pressure points that would incapacitate even the undead. Graves stumbled back, yellow eyes wide with the first flicker of uncertainty. "What is this? What have you done?" "You forgot who I was before I retreated from the world," Dominic said, advancing steadily now. "Before I chose solitude. They called me the Night King for a reason, Victor." The remaining minion chose that moment to lunge for Sophia. Without looking, Dominic flicked his wrist. The young vampire froze mid-air, held by an invisible force that slowly began to crush him from within. Blood vessels ruptured beneath his skin, creating a web of dark lines across his face. "I didn't just rule vampires," Dominic continued, his attention fixed on Graves. "I created them." With a sickening crunch, the minion's body imploded, collapsing into a heap of broken bones and ruptured flesh. Sophia gasped, pressing herself deeper into the shadow of the couch. Graves backed toward the broken windows, his confidence evaporating like morning dew. The old powers were a myth, a story to frighten fledglings. Were they? Dominic's smile was terrible to behold. "Shall we test that theory?" He raised his hand, and Graves rose from the floor, suspended by his throat. The younger vampire clawed at the invisible grip, panic replacing his earlier arrogance. "The bloodline you've been hunting," Dominic said, his voice eerily calm amid the storm's fury. "It was never meant for a ritual of daywalking. That's a corruption of the truth, a misinterpretation passed down through generations of your kind." He tightened his grip, and Graves's struggles grew more desperate. "The bloodline was mine, a lineage I protected through centuries, waiting for the right combination, the perfect balance between human and vampire." Dominic glanced at Sophia, who watched the confrontation with wide, unblinking eyes. Not for sacrifice, but for succession. With a flick of his wrist, Dominic sent Graves crashing into the far wall. The impact left a crater in the concrete. Before Graves could recover, Dominic was on him, one hand pinning him by the throat, the other poised over his heart. "You killed Audrey," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried over the storm's rage. "You hunted a child. My child." Graves' yellow eyes bulged. "She's not blood of my blood," Dominic hissed. "Soul of my soul. Some bonds transcend the physical, Victor. Something your kind never understood." With a single fluid motion, Dominic plunged his hand into Graves's chest. The younger vampire's scream cut through the howling wind as Dominic's fingers closed around his heart. Not to rip it out, but to hold it, to feel its unnatural rhythm. I could end you," Dominic said, his crimson eyes boring into Graves's yellow ones. "But death would be a mercy you don't deserve." Instead, he began to squeeze, not destroying the heart, but changing it. Graves convulsed, his back arching in agony as ancient magic rewrote his very essence. "Live as what you truly are," Dominic whispered. "A parasite, a shadow. Never to command, only to serve. Never to lead, only to follow. Bound to the earth, never to rise above it." When he withdrew his hand, it was clean. No blood, no gore, just the lingering scent of ozone and power. Graves slumped to the floor, his body contorting as the transformation took hold. His fine clothes tore as his limbs twisted, his spine curved, his features elongated into something feral and subhuman. The storm outside began to subside, the unnatural clouds dispersing as quickly as they had gathered. Shafts of sunlight once again pierced the penthouse, but now they seemed to actively avoid Dominic, bending around him as if light itself feared to touch him. What remained of Victor Graves crawled toward the broken windows, no longer a proud vampire lord, but a grotesque, bat-like creature. A true Nosferatu of ancient legend, doomed to scuttle in darkness, to feed on rats and vermin, to exist at the lowest rung of the supernatural hierarchy. "Go," Dominic commanded, "and should you ever approach what is mine again, I will unmake you entirely." The creature that had been Graves gave a pitiful shriek before launching itself from the window, disappearing into the shadows of the city below. For a long moment, the penthouse was silent, except for the gentle patter of rain and Sophia's rapid heartbeat. Dominic closed his eyes, willing the ancient power back into dormancy, feeling his eyes fade from crimson to their usual gray. "Is he gone?" Sophia's small voice came from behind the couch. Dominic turned, his features softening as he looked at the child, his child, in all the ways that mattered. "Yes, he won't harm you again." Sophia emerged cautiously, picking her way through the destruction. Glass crunched beneath her sneakers as she approached him, her eyes taking in the devastation with remarkable composure. "You're like me," she said finally. "Or I'm like you." Dominic knelt to her level, careful to move slowly, humanly. "We're connected, yes. But you're something new, Sophia. Something that has never existed before." She studied his face with those two wise eyes. "What happens now?" It was the question he'd been avoiding since the moment he'd sensed her existence. The responsible answer would be to find her a normal home, to let her grow up human, untouched by his world. But Victor had proven that was impossible. Others would come, drawn to her unique energy, her potential. "That depends on what you want," he said carefully. "I can find you a family, good people who would love you and protect you. I would watch over you from a distance." Sophia considered this, her head tilting in a gesture so reminiscent of Audrey that it made his ancient heart ache. Or you stay with me," Dominic said. "I teach you about both sides of your heritage, how to control the abilities that will emerge as you grow, how to protect yourself." "Would I become like you? A vampire?" Dominic shook his head. "You're already something different, half human, half vampire. Your path will be your own to choose when you're old enough to understand what it means." Sophia looked around at the destroyed penthouse, at the place where Graves had stood, at the spot where the minion had collapsed into dust. Then she looked back at Dominic, her decision already made. "I want to stay with you," she said simply. "You're the only one who knows what I am, the only one who can teach me." Relief washed through him, followed immediately by the weight of responsibility. This child, Audrey's daughter, his blood, would need protection, guidance, love, things he had denied himself for centuries. "Then we'll need a new home," he said, glancing at the shattered windows. "Somewhere safer." "The castle in your pictures?" Sophia asked, surprising him with her perception. He smiled, a genuine expression that felt foreign on his face. "Perhaps. It needs some modernizing first." 3 months later, Dominic sat across from Sophia at a heavy oak table in the dining room of his ancestral home in the Carpathian Mountains. The castle had been renovated with state-of-the-art security systems, comfortable modern furnishings, and high-speed internet that allowed Sophia to attend her virtual classes. The local authorities had been surprisingly accommodating about the adoption paperwork, though Dominic suspected his subtle influences had smoothed that path. Sophia spooned her soup carefully, blowing on each bite before eating it. Across from her, Dominic sipped from a crystal goblet filled with a dark red liquid. "Is that blood?" Sophia asked suddenly, her directness still catching him off guard. Dominic paused, the goblet halfway to his lips. "Yes," he answered honestly. They had agreed on truth between them, always. "Synthetic, mostly. I rarely need the real thing anymore." She nodded, accepting this as she accepted all the strange new realities of her life. "Will I need it someday?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Your physiology is unique. We'll discover your needs together." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the ancient stones of the castle walls. The storm had been raging for hours, but inside, they were warm and safe. Dominic watched as Sophia returned to her soup, her small face serious as she concentrated on not spilling. In the quiet moments like these, he could see glimpses of the woman she would become, strong, intelligent, neither fully human nor fully vampire, but something new and wonderful. A bridge between worlds. His daughter in truth, if not in biology. The wind howled around the castle towers, a sound that had once echoed his loneliness, but now seemed more like a lullaby, nature's rough harmony accompanying their quiet dinner. Sophia looked up at him and smiled, a small, knowing expression that contained both childish innocence and ancient wisdom. Dominic returned the smile, feeling the last walls around his heart crumble to dust. After centuries of solitude, of self-imposed exile from both human and vampire societies, he had found his purpose again. Not in ruling, not in accumulating wealth or power, but in guiding this extraordinary child through a world that would both fear and covet her. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the ancient walls of the castle, father and daughter continued their meal in comfortable silence. The soft clink of spoon against bowl and crystal against teeth, creating a domestic symphony that neither had thought possible just months before. And in the shadows between heartbeats, in the spaces between words, Dominic felt Audrey's presence, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a part of the bond that now connected him to Sophia. A circle completed, a promise fulfilled, a future unfolding like a flower